Mark Plamondon, representing Alberta Industrial Heartland, Executive Director. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a while, actually. We haven't had a really great, I shouldn't say really great, we haven't had an energy guest on in quite some time, so I'm really glad to be able to advance this section of the show. And so thank you so much for coming and talking to us today.
Oh, I really appreciate the invitation. Thank
Awesome. You. So give me a little bit of, maybe for the uninitiated, maybe give me a little bit of a rundown of what the Alberta Industrial Heartland is and what you guys do.
Yeah, happy to do that. So there's two things to talk about here. There's Alberta's Industrial Heartland as a jurisdiction, and there's Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association, which is the association that represents the municipalities and tries to promote this region. So I'll talk about both those things. So in the mid-90s, four municipalities, Strathcona County, Sturgeon County, Lamont County, and the city of Fort Saskatchewan, zoned off a region, was named Alberta's Industrial Heartland with the intent of making this sort of a focused value-add energy cluster. Gotcha. And at that time, they formed the association to steward economic development in this region called Alberta's Industrial Heartland. It sits in the northeast corner of the Edmonton metropolitan region. And about 10 years later, so that was in 1998, the association was formed. 10 years later, so the city of Edmonton joined as well, and there's a portion in the city of Edmonton that's in the Industrial Heartland. So each of these municipalities, City of Edmonton, City of Fort Saskatchewan, Strathcona, Sturgeon, and Lamont counties, each of them have some area of land in Alberta's Industrial Heartland, and they fund Alberta's Industrial Heartland Association to advance economic development and investment attraction to this region.
Gotcha.
And, this is a massive area, 582 square kilometers, which is massive. And the intent is that this region becomes a value-add energy cluster. And our role then as an association is to really, promote the region. So there's a significant marketing effort, but there's also an effort to work directly with investors to help them understand the region, site selection services, figuring out potential feedstock strategies, access to infrastructure, introduction to joint venture partners, introduction to government folks, that sort of concierge service, facilitating companies to help them understand if their investment makes sense in the Industrial Heartland. And that's a big piece of what we do. We have other parts of our association too. We do some government relations, government awareness, communications, social media stuff, but it's all with the intent to underpin growth in the region.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the concierge service. We talk a fair bit on the show about new market entry, and that seems to be such a unique and important, almost critical thing that we need as a province and as a country is just that new market entry organization that can basically navigate for someone coming in, like what you just said. So what are some of the target audiences that you guys are looking for when you're attracting, and you say, you're trying to market the sector and the industry within the Alberta Industrial Heartland. What are some of the target audiences you're looking for to bring in?
Right. So, there's a fairly wide range, but, we have to recognize that there's competitive advantages, and you need to emphasize and lean on those competitive advantages if you're going to have a chance of landing an investment here versus other parts of the world. So while we would love to have as wide a range of industries and investments in the region, it naturally results, the companies that come here looking are the ones that really want to take advantage of those low-cost energy resources. So the low cost, either it's methane or ethane or propane or butane or others. These are all components of natural gas. Access to low cost feedstocks. And then add that on, access to all of the infrastructure, skilled workforce, available land, and now carbon capture, utilization, and storage. All of the infrastructure and advantages, it's companies that can take advantage of those types of assets that really add a strong value and add a value proposition to the types of investments that companies would be looking for here. So those are typically value-add energy type investments. There is some opportunity, of course, for some straight manufacturing, et cetera, but we're always challenged with proximity to large population bases.
Yeah,
so often the type of company that is interested in the Industrial Heartland is large volume, access to those low-cost feedstocks to produce one step in the value chain to get a product that is exported to market.
Gotcha.
We do spend a lot of time, though, looking at various sectors. How can we diversify the region as much as possible? How can we have as wide a range of products produced in the region? It always comes down to, though, what what makes sense for investors and companies that are looking to build their next facility.
Fantastic. In previous conversations, you've mentioned stuff about just to kind of pinpoint and highlight the unity and the importance of unity, getting all those municipalities together as another value add. So you've talked about the raw materials piece. So you talked feedstocks and how advantageous the area is for that. And then on top of that, I just want to talk to government, having that unification of municipal governments with those different municipalities. Some of those things that you mentioned in other conversations, maybe just pinpoint a little bit on that. Like you even talked about emergency services and those other things that are not very, pinpointed.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they don't result in a number on a spreadsheet,
right?
But they add value to the region. And so it is important to emphasize that the collaboration in the region, it's second to none. And I'm not just talking about collaboration across the municipalities. That's also very, very strong. But the collaboration amongst industry participants and between industry and the municipalities and industry and the provincial government, it's second to none. So there's a collaborative effort in the Industrial Heartland region on airshed monitoring. So the Forward Air Partnership is a entity that is a collaborative effort between governments and industry. There is emergency response entity, so it's called NRCare. That's a collaborative effort between municipalities and the industry in the region, recognizing, of course, that with airshed monitoring, emergency response, these things are most effective in a collaborative effort, and it's value add for everybody to be collaborative. Likewise with even just community relationships. So there's a collaborative effort between the Industrial Heartland and the industrial associations in the region, NCIA, Forward Air Partnership, and NRCare. It's something called Life in the Heartland. And that is a collaborative effort that is intentional in terms of communicating outwardly to residents what's happening with industry in the region, what activities are going on, just raising awareness so that people, builds a level of trust between community and industry. So this, and then there's others, right? These are just sort of three. This collaborative effort in the region, it really demonstrates that you've got support. For a new entrant into this region, recognizing that you've got support in this region, the community understands and is supportive of industrial development. There is a collaborative effort around these sort of outward-facing activities. It just really adds to the value proposition in our region.
Well, and that community ultimately becomes your workforce.
Absolutely.
So they have to have ultimate buy-in at the end of the day, and to see that it's such a vast plethora of community that's involved in this association. Like you said, it's second to none. It's tough to beat. So Alberta Industrial Heartland really focuses a lot on communication and making sure that entities outside the world that are looking for a place to set up shop, looking for advancement, that Alberta Industrial Heartland is an option for them, and in most cases a prime option for them. What is the process to attract them and communicate to them? I mean, is it traveling out into the world as an association and telling the story at conferences and so on and so forth? Is it direct reach out? Like, how is that? It's a complicated process. How is that?
Yeah, there's a number of marketing vectors that we look at, and some are, the most effective ones. Of course, we have a website, and there's some incoming calls that come through the website or some promotional materials that we put out there. Mostly, though, it is being in market, having our team in market, at conferences, meeting companies who all, go to these specific conferences to advance their investment interests. And so it is being in market and then doing head office visits and building credibility over time with companies. Now, I want to be clear on that point. Like, these conversations for the large value-add investment projects, conversations can be a decade, right? Like, it's not, oh, we just met you, we're going to build a plant next year. That's rarely the case, right? It is introductions, conversations, discussions around the competitive advantages in the Industrial Heartland. Maybe there's enough interest where you can send some information and highlight some specific feedstock strategies or what can be done or what the real competitive advantages are. That may then lead to tours, site visits. So site visits and tours, every time you have somebody who comes to Industrial Heartland where you drive them around, seeing is believing is, okay, look at this region. Look at the land that's available. Look at the cluster that's here. Look at how environmentally responsible everything is here with respect to the companies that are operating here already. And also just seeing as well that, okay, this is a bona fide cluster. There's over 45 billion of assets in the ground as we speak. That's supported by capable industry, supply chains, maintenance services, engineering services, all of the supports that make this cluster happen. Seeing it, you go, okay, wait a sec, this is a real cluster. This can really happen here. And so those are the most effective for us. And that takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, but that's the most effective for us. Of course, you've got all the other sort of marketing strategies, but really being in market physically, personal connections, personal conversations, one-on-ones, that's most effective for us.
Awesome. You talk about responsibility, and as the world has changed so much in the last few years, ESG has become a big topic, and communicating that, especially for investors, companies want to know that their methods by coming here is responsible, and so on and so forth. How has your communication changed around that, and emphasizing all of these awesome opportunities that are here, along with the public benefit and the market benefit from ESG? How's that communication happened?
Yeah, so we emphasize that point, but interesting enough, again, the companies themselves know the markets and they know where markets are going, and they're often coming to us specifically wanting to talk about how they're going to manage their carbon emissions, for example. Like, you won't have a conversation about a new value add facility without them wanting to have a conversation about how they can manage their carbon emissions, what are the carbon capture and storage capability in the region, and who can we talk to on those things. So, we will, of course, promote the ESG strength that's offered in Alberta and the Industrial Heartland. But a lot of cases, again, companies know their markets. They know where they want to go. They know what their objectives are. And they're driving that themselves by talking to us and seeing that. So it's both ways, right?
Gotcha.
We, of course, promote it, becomes part of our marketing tools. But in a lot of cases, companies know their objectives for their ESG goals, and they're looking to meet those objectives. And it's a conversation, from them saying, how can we meet our ESG goals? And we're right there to tell them all the great things that happen in the Industrial Heartland and how they can meet their ESG goals.
Awesome. Something we've talked about before is based around what the potential of the Alberta Industrial Heartland is for the province of Alberta, the country, I mean, even the world. I mean, when you're attracting international investors, now it's I love the term, and I've kind of coined this myself, introducing Alberta to the world and the world to Alberta. Right. And you guys are an example of that through and through by trying to get people to come here and set up shop here. So, the opportunities, I think, when we talk feedstock and everything else, are massive. ESG obviously is there. What are some of the key things you might be looking for to bring to the Heartland? So if we were to talk, let's talk to the world right now for a second. Who do you think would be the best fit right now? We're always talking about amplifying what's already existing. Yes. But what are you looking for right now that you feel would be the most important to come in?
Well, I mean, so we have our marketing efforts in a variety of segments. And as we've talked before, diversification is an objective of our region. It is an objective of the province. And so, new entrants into the region that would produce products that have different end markets than we currently have, that is always welcome, right? Because the wider range of end markets you have, the more diverse of a revenue stream companies have, and then ultimately the more robust and stable activities you have, and then the community as well becomes more robust and more stable, and that really, I think, leads to strong communities. Having not being in a boom bust economy, but in a more stable economy leads to robust communities, and so diversification is really important. So for us, where we can attract a wider range of companies that produce different end products, that is really valuable for us. Again, though, the realities are, I mean, in some cases that works. The realities are, companies that take advantage of the economic and the competitive advantages that are here produce maybe a certain products that are in a more narrow range, given the advantages that we have here, low-cost feedstocks. And so often that's the type of company that we're working with. And we will work with anybody who comes here and says, look, we want to understand the Heartland. We want to help them understand. All facilities built in the Industrial Heartland and built in Alberta meet the stringent regulatory requirements of the region, and so there's no concern there. And so, diversification is great. In the end, we're going to work with anybody who really thinks that they can bring an economic project to our region.
Gotcha. Yeah. I don't want to harp too much on the pandemic. So, I mean, you mentioned your communications. A lot of it relies on getting into market, making those connections, face-to-face conversations. Obviously, that's been pretty difficult over the last couple of years. Was your focus different or changed to more maybe internal? How I know you talked before, you did like a boatload of webinars, and it was just like day in and day out of computer fatigue. But did your focus change at all in regards to maybe exploring different things, new technologies that were coming in that you wanted to attract to the region? How did the pandemic play out for you?
Yeah, so the pandemic was an interesting time for us, given that a lot of our efforts are through travel and
Right.
face-to-face interactions. So particularly from March 2020 to April, May of 2021. And so that resulted in, as we talked about previously, lots of webinars. So we had companies that were looking at specific projects. Pandemic hit. They, of course, locked down. We're locking down. We're putting sort of everything on hold. And so that period of time was, again, lots of, webinars and trying to stay connected through virtual tools. But, really, in about a year, even though we weren't fully out of the pandemic, and you can argue we're not fully out of it now, of course, but companies started saying, okay, we recognize, I think we see the light at the end of the tunnel. We're going to now open up again our business development activities. And so we were able to continue to advance business development activities online, virtually, and then now we're getting back into the travel again. So there wasn't like this massive shift to a different type of product or a different value proposition, because our value proposition holds in all cases.
Gotcha.
It was more just the tools that you used, and then the activities now are picking back up to where we were.
Right. Is there any specific or key messaging that you guys are focusing on right now? Like as the world changes and as markets change, obviously, is there certain things that you hone in and key to that might be needing a spotlight right now?
Well, the key point that we make to investors and to governments is that in the industrial heartland, you can meet both your economic objectives and your ESG objectives.
Gotcha.
And as I mentioned, as companies are looking to meet their ESG objectives, the industrial heartland becomes one of the areas that they're seriously looking at. Because there's very few regions in the world that are going to have your low-cost feedstock and your carbon capture and storage capability and the social and governance standards that you have here in Canada and leadership that you have from companies here. So, that's what we're really trying to highlight to companies is that, this region you can use this region to enable you reaching your objectives across the whole spectrum.
It's an all-in-one.
It's absolutely.
We've talked about below the soil. We've talked about ESG. We've talked about governance. The social impacts that we're really focusing on making sure that they're responsible. It's an all-in-one, and I think we've said this before, but it is tough to beat being here,
in my opinion, for sure. And as the ESG component becomes more important for companies because end markets are demanding it.
Yes.
I think that just continues to raise this region's profile and the advantage of this region because it offers that strong support for ESG initiatives.
Yeah.
Not
and
just
investors are guiding that too, right?
Exactly right.
And that's a big part of businesses' decisions is what do our investors want? And we talk about markets guiding how things move things. Going into the future, what are some of the well, actually, I'm going to go back. When we look at Alberta as a whole and its powerhouse, and Alberta Industrial Heartland and its powerhouse of where it is, strategically compared to the rest of the world, like, would you argue that we're probably one of the tops? And do we have any other advantages that we might be able to go and pursue that would take us to the next level?
Like you're talking about other outside the sector and the well, it's interesting. So the Edmonton metropolitan region has got a lot of things going for it, and we work. Well, Edmonton Global, for example, is one of our partners in a number of areas, and they're heavily focused on advancing AI and machine learning.
Yes,
those things all feed into technology development that ultimately can feed into the types of companies that we have here.
Gotcha.
And so the whole, if I can use the term ecosystem, but the whole ecosystem in the Edmonton metropolitan region has got lots of synergies that can really help add to the value in the value add cluster here in the industrial heartland. Yeah. And so that's just an example. Yeah. AI, machine learning, you mentioned Port Alberta.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah.
The logistics capability in the Edmonton metropolitan region all adds to the value of this region. So it's tremendous. And one of the things that we talk about with companies, because it's different in other parts of the world, is you build a plant in the industrial heartland, you're a half-hour drive from home. So your workforce can live in. You don't have to live in a camp. Quality of life. Yes. You don't have to live in a camp, right?
Great point.
So in other parts of the world, you have to manage a whole camp facility in a little city which has its range of problems with camp living, and the quality of life is fly in, fly out, which is nowhere near the same as the quality of living as being able to live, sleep in your bed every night. That again builds robust communities.
No kidding. Yeah.
And because the industrial heartland is right in the northeast corner of the Edmonton metropolitan region, it is again one of those sort of intangibles that underpins the overall value proposition here.
Yeah. And the Edmonton International Airport, we've done some events with them just recently, like them trying to build more direct flights as well for international markets. So it's easy to get here. It's fast to get here. And that just helps. Again, one of those intangibles, like you say, but it's surprising when you got CEOs and presidents moving all around the world and their hub is set up here, that importance is so big. So it's great to see Edmonton being, part of the heartland and a part of the association. Yeah,
and the Edmonton International Airport's doing a number of, economic development things. They've had a number of announcements on how they're trying to advance hydrogen in the use around the Edmonton International Airport, which helps underpin we're trying to develop a hydrogen economy in this region in partnership with Edmonton Global Transition Accelerator, Government of Alberta, and Government of Canada through the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. So this all plays into the value add of this region for investments in the industrial heartland.
Just amplifies and amplifies. And you mentioned Edmonton Global too. They got a big focus on bringing events here as well as an organization that all pertain to energy and larger markets and international markets coming to Alberta.
And it's all part of telling the story of what's offered in this region. And we think, selfishly that Alberta's industrial heartland is really the crown jewel, but there's lots of great assets in this region for sure.
Well, I think you got a pretty good argument there. When you bring all of those factors together, all those resources. Then you kind of, I don't know how much tie Alberta Industrial Heartland has with Fort McMurray and just the communications and the work that you guys do there as well. But and then even Calgary, if you want to start bringing the hubs together, Calgary's a lot of the head offices pieces. They're in direct communication with you guys.
For sure.
It all works together. The whole thing for this thing to be as powerful as it is has to be together.
That's right. And it's a great comment around, I've talked a lot about the Edmonton metropolitan region, but Calgary as well. For sure, Calgary is your center for your legal expertise, your professional expertise, engineering, accounting, all of those things associated with the M&A expertise, all associated with the energy industry, right? So your head offices of a lot of the companies that have facilities in the industrial heartland, their head offices would be in Calgary, and that all ties into the overall value in this region. Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Opportunities for, no, I don't want to say opportunities. I want to say, what do we think would be a great addition? Is there something that maybe we have an opportunity that we should bring here? We should amplify it all, whether it's communications, maybe it's, we talked about infrastructure. It's pretty tough to beat what we got already.
Yeah. Well, it's tough to beat. Again, so the majority of products coming out of the industrial heartland move by rail.
Gotcha.
And so, and CN and CP are continually investing in their business. But for sure, continuing development of rail infrastructure and rail assets, that is a big asset for the region. Just the type of products that are produced in the heartland and to move those to export markets, whether it's the U.S. or internationally, rail is going to be the mode of transportation.
Getting them even just coast to coast.
For
sure. If you want to go to BC.
Exactly. In the volumes that we're talking about, rail is the mode of transportation that's going to happen. And so continuing to improve rail assets, that will continue to enhance the industrial heartland, for sure. Yeah. And, there's been actually significant investment in rail assets in the region. So in addition to the Class 1 railways, CN and CP, of course, Can-Do Rail constructed a rail terminal in the industrial heartland in Sturgeon County. Alberta Midland Rail constructed a few years ago a rail terminal in Lamont County in the industrial heartland. These rail terminals, they're service providers, and they allow for, car service, car storage, maintenance. Really, it enables efficiencies for CN and CP to just hook up the unit trains and go.
Let it roll,
right? Yeah. And so the service providers of the Can-Do Rail Terminal and Alberta Midland Rail, that continues to enhance the value of the rail assets and enhance the value of Alberta's industrial heartland. So those types of investments are fantastic for the region, and continued enhancement of the rail infrastructure will continue to add value for sure.
Awesome. Yep. More to the communications part and attracting investors here into Alberta. You guys have a big event that's coming up here in September. Unfortunately, we missed last year's event. So I can only imagine that there's a hunger to get back to these events for not just you, but even your attendees. Maybe speak a little bit to the importance of that event and what that revolves around, what the focus is.
Yeah. So, well, we were really disappointed last year because last year the summer was fairly open from a COVID protocol standpoint.
Yeah.
And so we put tickets on sale, and the week before we had to cancel the Omicron variant. So it was really disappointing for us. And so we're looking forward to September again. The purpose of that event really is to sort of spotlight the activities in Alberta's Industrial Heartland, continue to communicate to the region, to residents, municipal politicians throughout Alberta primarily, but some national and some international.
Okay.
What's going on in Alberta's Industrial Heartland. And so we think it's important to hold that event. It's been a very popular event, so there's obviously interest in what we have going on. And so we try to spend part of that event talking about specifically what's going on in the Industrial Heartland. We want part of that event to sort of talk about the general economics of Alberta, as well as maybe the petchem space or wherever there's growth. Mm-hmm. And then we usually try to end the day with, a keynote speaker who is entertaining and is able to, really
take you away from the world for a little bit.
Yeah, not entertaining in terms of not being related to what we're doing, but just, providing some lighthearted insights into what's happening and really just to close out the day. But that event of ours that we've been holding, we really appreciate all of our stakeholders and partners who have interest in coming to that and our sponsors, and we're looking forward to doing that again.
They're really well attended, and at the last one that we were at, the information that was given, I'm trying to think of his name. He was mostly around plastics.
So there's last time we held, we had Bob Masterson from CIAC, the Chemistry Industry Association.
That's who it was, is Bob.
We talked about the plastics and the recyclable plastics.
Yes.
Did a great job.
Yeah.
We also have had Mark Aramo, who is a senior executive with IHS Markit, so an energy analyst, and his expertise is the petrochemical sector. Yeah. So he'll talk about petrochemicals because that's, again, such a growth area for us.
Big time, yep.
And we've had Catherine Rothbrock talking about the Alberta economy. And we think all that ties into a really interesting day for folks. And again, we appreciate all the support and everyone's interest, really.
Fantastic. Right on. Well, again, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today and telling us about the Alberta Industrial Heartland, some of the great work you guys are doing. I'm really excited to see the growth. I mean, I know the world and markets are changing, but you guys are always going to be such a key relevance to not just Alberta, but the support. You're the foundation of Canada, really. And it's great to have such good voices like your association behind it, seeing that collaboration, showing that to the world that we are a stable place. Yeah. We are doing things responsibly. And this is where you should be bringing your business if you want to get the most advantage on a world market. So thank you so much for what you guys do.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. And, nothing is done well without partners and collaboration. And so certainly our municipal partners and the other partners in the region all make this region such a great place to be. So we're happy to be part of it. And I'm glad I could come in here and talk to you about it today.
Right on. Thank you so much.
You bet.